And as Eric just pointed out, we've only had electricity though here in the state for about 30 years.
I think he's got you guys in the Amish mixed up.
It's true. It's true. We have Mennonites out here.
We have a lot of Mennonites in Kansas.
They do some great woodwork and great butter.
We have I think they're Mennonites here too, up in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. I've only ever had the honey before, but they do a good job.
That's from bees, not the Mennonites don't make that.
Oh, they don't?
No, that's the bees make that.
They just handle the bees.
Yeah, that's right.
And jar it. Got it. Okay.
It's important to make sure people know.
That would be weird. This isn't honey.
That's right. I made this myself. Did you?
Yeah.
So since we are officially rolling and we got actually people watching, I think we need to hear from, you said you go by Bud at Starbucks?
That's correct.
We need to hear from the good doctor about his background, how he got into the field he's in, why he got into it, all that good stuff. And I understand also you have some background also with a very popular instructor, as you were the head of, was it medical training stuff?
Yeah, I was the medical program director for tactical response and everybody's professional wrestling heel, James Yeager. Yeah. I mean, he's kind of a polarizing guy. I mean, not kind of, he is.
Oh, he is.
Yeah. And people either love him or they hate him. Like James has always been good to me, so I don't have any beef with him.
Genius businessman.
Yeah, I left there not because of like any ill will. I think I'm actually like maybe one of the only former tactical response instructors that's still like part of the.
You still get a Christmas card?
Yeah, I wasn't voted off the island.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, I still train out there a couple times a year. I see James on a fairly regular basis. We just had lunch the other day. So yeah, I started doing that in 2006 when I moved to Tennessee. When I got here, I actually moved here from Washington State. And when I got here, I was like, I need to find some place to train. When I was in Washington, I trained with some of Marty Hayes's affiliates at the Firearms Academy of Seattle. And then when I got here, I was like, well, I need to find something else. And, Camden was about an hour and 10 minutes from where I was living. And so I started training there and wasn't there for very long before James was like, he found out that before I was going to the medical college here that I, worked as a first responder for 10 years and had an EMS background and said, hey, what do you know about this stuff? And I said, well, I know a little bit. And then after a while he was like, well, why don't you, you can teach the medical stuff primarily, but also, be cross-trained as a firearms instructor. And I had probably, I don't know, probably around 2,000 hours of formal training at that point.
Nice.
Before. And then did his instructor course and then kind of did like the apprenticeship thing for about a year.
Cool.
Where it was probably 40 weekends and then, started teaching firearms classes for him independently as well.
Nice.
And then when I left there, I never went and taught firearms classes, under my own banner, other than like promotional stuff, that I did with Chuck or with the other guys at Polypalooza and things like that. Just kind of one-offs, nothing specifically, firearm centric, although kind of like firearms tangential, because I do a lot of, I don't know what you call them, collaboration or team up classes with other people where they do the firearm side and I do the medicine side. And then we kind of, do combination field exercise type stuff.
Cool.
But that's sort of a brief snapshot, but the full snapshot is I became a police explorer cadet when I was 16. And then went to community college when I graduated, to the law enforcement program there, which was basically, just a stretched out version of the academy that you got college credit for.
Yeah.
And then after I completed that, I went to, I actually started working full time in the fire service then for a combination department that was fire and EMS. And then I also worked as a guard on an armored truck company. And then, at that point I was working like 5 days a week, and that wasn't enough. So then I picked up another day a week working for just the hospital-based EMS service, which was ALS provider where I was at, and did that for several years. And then ended up moving to Spokane, Washington, where I went to Gonzaga University for 3 years and picked up 2 more degrees. And then moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and I've been here in Nashville for 16 years now. So, and then I work as a assistant professor of oral and maxillofacial surgery for the medical college here, and that takes up probably about 90% of my time. I still work as a reserve police officer. And then I still teach on, the occasional, I probably teach 10 classes a year. So about, one every month or 6 weeks or so. Cool. And I just do, open enrollment, mostly for the attendees of, how like a lot of training companies have like regular attendees. So it's like the people that show up, that have taken every shooting class. Now they host me and they show up for the medical class kind of thing.
Cool.
So, and then church groups and things like that as well. We have, huge churches out here in Tennessee, with a 10,000 parishioners in one church. And so there's always kind of and we've actually had a couple, unfortunately, active shooter events at churches here in Nashville. So there's a definite market for it,
Absolutely.
So they get the most agnostic guy that they can find to come in and try and give everybody a straight shot at it, I suppose.
Well, that's definitely been a hot topic on Facebook. People asking about church security groups and training and things like that. So it's absolutely pertinent and important. Tell me a bit about your specialty on the medical side.
I'm a hospital dentist, and hospital dentist is, people don't usually hear that term until I say like, well, you've heard of Gary K. Roberts before? And they're like, yeah, of course, Doc GKR, and I'm like, yeah, he's also a hospital dentist. And then they're like, oh, okay. And I said, yeah, we do the exact same kind of thing. So basically what it boils down to is that we're an attached portion, or I can't speak exactly for him because I don't know what the parameters of his educational facility are. But as far as mine goes, I'm like the direct action version of the oral and maxillofacial surgery department. So my job is to, we're attached to a hospital. So the college and the hospital are literally like right next door to each other, connected by just a corridor. And patients that come into the ER that have any, wounds basically from the floor of the orbit all the way down to underneath the jaw falls into our real estate category. And we're in the inner city, and we service a large population of Nashville where there's on average about 3 to 5 shootings per day. Yeah. And so, and those people are largely, as screwed up as this sounds, they're largely uninsured. So they end up coming to our hospital, and we take care of them. And so the funny thing about that, of course, is that a number of those people, if they make it to the emergency room, they make it to the ICU. And if they make it to the ICU, then they generally make it, back out alive. And that's not because, well, it's for 2 reasons. number one is we're awesome and we're good at our job. But number two is that, handgun rounds in particular, or low velocity rifle rounds are just horrible at causing immediately life-ending injuries. So we see a number of, I put pictures of them on my Instagram page, and put a little, brief synopsis kind of in lay person language there so that people can get what we're doing. And, it's very little of it has to do with the teeth. People think that I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not that guy to go to if you need to know, what's best for bleaching your teeth and things like that. I don't really get too much into that. Maybe my dental assistants can help you with that, but it's not something I really pay too much attention to.
This tooth and it's aching.
Yeah. I can take that out. Yeah. We get that out right straight away. Hammer.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I do the majority of the time. We deal with whatever comes through the door. We also spend 2 days a week taking care of correctional care patients from all over the state of Tennessee that are brought to us by corrections officers. And you'd be amazed at what we see with them. Anything from penetrating trauma to blunt force trauma to cancer to abscesses to rotten teeth, the whole gamut. And it makes for an interesting week. I really love my job and I'm happy to go to work every day. And after working in private practice for about 12 years, I say private practice, but it's not what you would think is private practice. It's public health private practice, which is, I really could just call it public health. It's just mostly taking care of people that are so sick that they are going to die if they don't get abscesses taken out of their skulls, or people that can't afford to have massive amounts of restorative dental work. So they end up with, meth mouth type issues or, just generalized decay. Even the ones that aren't into narcotics, they get, pretty sick. So that's what I do. And it's a fun place to be. I originally had thought about being an emergency room physician. And, because I had such extensive experience in pre-hospital care and, working directly with the emergency department on the ambulance. And one night I was at work and in between calls, you'd go into their employee lounge, and get one of those short cans of soda and some saltines. And one of the ER physicians was there and he was like, "Hey, how's it going? How's your studies going?" I said, "Oh, they're going really good. I'm going to take the MCAT soon." And he said, "MCAT, huh? Okay. You really want to do this?" And he said, you're going to not be retiring for, 45 years. And I said, yeah, I know that's kind of what I want to do. And he said, "Okay, well, if I was going to do this all over again, I think I'd be a dentist." And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, you do all the same stuff, except you don't have a horrible call schedule." And I said, "Really?" I had no idea. And he's like, "Yeah. I mean, what did you think they did?" And I said, "I don't know. I thought they did fillings and sealants and stuff." And he said, "Well, that's just the stuff that you've had done." He said, "There's a whole other, world out there that you don't know anything about." And I was like, "Huh, okay." Well, as it turned out, my mom worked for a dentist from the time I was 3 years old. So I orchestrated it with her to go work with, some oral surgeons and some other people and then her boss as well. And then immediately I just kind of shifted gears. But I found myself, in the facet of the profession where I do still have the same call schedule. So it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but it's good either way.
So how often does a case come into the hospital where it adjusts your teaching schedule? Where, we all need to come to see this and discuss this and see see it in person?
Well, the lectures are only ever a maximum of 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times if I come out of a lecture, there might be someone waiting to ferry me to wherever they are, or they'll call or text, and I'll check my text messages at the end and then they'll say, "Need you here," or "Need you over here." and I'll go there. That happens fairly regularly.
Oh, I mean, for the students' benefit.
Like where it turns into like a teaching case kind of thing?
Yeah.
Oh, daily. It happens daily. Yeah. 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 I always tell people that, people kind of have a strange idea of what, medical school or professional school and dental school is like. And it's, to me, my perspective is it's a lot like the movie Young Frankenstein. Do you remember that movie with Gene Wilder? Frankenstein? Yeah. So at the very beginning, like when he's lecturing and he's like, absolutely nothing, that's very much what it's like. So we don't have the operatory theaters that we used to have. I think that a lot of that kind of got wrecked with HIPAA sort of stuff. Yeah. But we do have like a video version of that where with GoPros and cameras and overhead zoom cameras that people can see directly like what we see and see the surgical site. So is some cool stuff with virtual learning like that. But I do really wish if I was, if I had $100 million to contribute to the college, and I built like the, Sherman House, medical facility or whatever, I would put in an old school operatory theater but make it, have 500 seats, with the surgery at the bottom, kind of Victorian style so that people could, really experience it. I think it's a good way to learn. And, I know that this, just like anybody, the best way that students learn is by literally seeing it. And I always tell them like, all right, you've seen it one time. Now let's do the learn one, do one, teach one. And, then I listen to them teach it to somebody else and I'll say like, and here's the adjustments that you need to make. So yeah, I think it's a cool way to learn. And yeah, it's fun how, and spontaneous how you get to go, oh, what we were just talking about, here it is, so
that's cool.
Yeah.
So part of the topic that we're going to be discussing, and you brought up revolvers, so we're going to need to get into that eventually. Also, you discussed pistol caliber and low velocity rifle.
Sure.
So let's bring Chuck in on this also. For what you guys have seen, is there anything, and obviously shot placement plays a huge part. I've seen photos, I've seen studies of 9mm just not being sufficient to incapacitate someone for brain shots due to deflection or something like that. From what you've been seeing, what are you seeing? That's actually, I'd rather go that route. What have you been seeing?
Lots of lower caliber stuff. So like a lot of like 9mm / 38 special and under, and a lot of 380s and 32s, 25s, 22s, that type of stuff. So I think that among the criminal element, the idea that small concealable handguns are still in vogue, at least in this part of the country, I think is still factual. And I think that has to do a lot with the mode of dress that people have, because they're carrying these guns in their pockets, not necessarily in their waistbands, because their waistbands aren't necessarily around their waists. And, if you carried a large caliber handgun, but your waistline is, or the waistband of your pants is even with the underside of your buttocks, then that's not really conducive to concealment. And then of course, I think that a lot of it also has to do with what is available. And a lot of those guns, of course, are sourced from, illegal fences and things like that. And taken in burglaries and everywhere else. So
if you had to make an estimation as to the type of projectile, being a full metal jacket or a hollow point, are you able to, do you have any
yeah, I'd say almost, with rare exception, do I see expanding ammunition of any kind. Most all of it is either like a full lead type bullet or some type of jacketed, partial jacketed or completely jacketed. either enclosed base or an open base type projectile.
Yeah.
I have a one that I sent Chuck not too long ago that I consulted on, that was a case that took place here where there wasn't any maxillofacial trauma, but it involves two participants in the golden half hour that occurs from when the bar closes to when the parking lot clears out. And it was a altercation between two folks that didn't like each other. And, there was a lot of bucking up, and then somebody produced a gun, and then somebody else did that. Hey man, no, we're cool. And as he held his hand up, the guy shot him. The round went through his hand and then right into his chest, like right into the left side of his chest, transected his heart, and then hit the backside of his spine. And probably, he was probably killed within seconds, actually lost consciousness in seconds, and then died shortly thereafter. But I have x-rays and photos that I show in my classes of that. And it was pretty impressive. It was 130 grain, 38 special, purchased at a Walmart, not less than probably 3/4 of a mile from where the shooting occurred. So this is non-expanding, Remington green box, Air Force ball, like 130 grain ball, and, but very good shot placement and, going through a hand, and which didn't make any difference at all. And this fella had some fairly thick hands, not like that, 4 inches of meat in your hand is going to do much to stop a bullet that's going to do 30 inches in calibrated gelatin, but it sure did a number on this guy. And with zero over penetration. So, but I sent pictures of that of Chuck and I've shown it to a few other people in the community, and always thought that was kind of interesting for especially when people poo-poo the revolvers, and say, revolvers suck, and this 38 Widowmaker and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, it made a widow for somebody, but not for the shooter. But yeah, indubitably, there was even one that I posted not too long ago that I couldn't tell from the CT scans or from the radiographs that it's either a 22 or a 25. And it landed, it went through the guy's nose, like right through what we call the ala of the nose right here. And it went into his nasal cavity, very, very close to the center line. Hit the posterior part of his maxillary sinus, kind of did a loop, must have flown up and bonked him in the eye, in the actual floor of the orbit, and then fell back down and rested kind of in his, in the turbinate area of his nose. But it deformed in such a way that it actually looks like the flip off emoji. Nice. And so on the x-ray, when I looked at it, I was like, look at this. Joke? I showed it. I showed it to one of my colleagues, and he was like, that bullet is like, telling everybody like, screw you, that, this guy, that's the luckiest shot of his life. Like, it really should have killed him. And it was also kind of interesting because it sort of screws up another urban legend of 22s and 25s, having really poor performance through intermediate barriers. And this was actually a shot through safety glass. And so it went through the glass, must have had some kind of spalling event, but still had enough velocity to go through, a good amount of soft tissue and cartilage, bonk around a little bit through relatively thin bone, and then arrest itself in some more soft tissue. So kind of a neat sort of thing, but also makes you go like, man, there's so many variables in play when you talk about these things, that you really have to almost look at each case literally on a case-by-case basis. Yep. and sort of chop up the facts, because it's so hard to group all this stuff into generalities and speak with the way we did back in the 90s with the Sanow and Evan Marshall stuff about, the percentages of this projectile doing this, was kind of thought as being almost an absolute, but now we kind of have to think about this a bit more pragmatically and holistically, that there really is no absolutes with any of this stuff. And I mean, it's not just a roll of the dice from when the projectile impacts the person. It's a roll of the dice every time it passes through anything other than plain air, including precipitation, you know? And it just is a really neat application of applied physics. When you kind of get down to when you remove all of the emotion and the humanness out of it and just look at it in terms of pure science, it's really quite fascinating, I think.
Well, it's just like what Jared Reston urged, but one of the biggest lessons from Jared Reston's interview back in 2016 was bullets do funny things when they hit stuff. There we go.
Yeah, I agree.
So how often are you seeing projectiles going up into the brain and out, or up into the brain and still surviving?
Well, if they go in and they stay, you know, within the confines of the skull, so they kind of make a one-way trip and not a round trip, it seems like those people, you know, tend to, you know, kind of take sort of the predictable path that I said. You know, if they don't die of some other thing like a major intracranial bleed or massive intracranial swelling, then they tend to do okay. Now, the ones that go like through and through, that's usually a high enough, you know, to punch through the outer table of bone, the inner table of bone, go through brain matter or brain stem, and then come out the other side. You know, that's a good 4 thick pieces of bone that you've gone through, plus the bone that's in the middle. That takes quite a bit of velocity to do that. And when you achieve those kinds of velocities, that's when you reach the, you know, elastic limits of the tissue, and you get, you know, the cavitation and the stretch cavity stuff that people see a lot, you know, in ballistic simulants. And that's when that comes into play. So, you know, if you have a hole poked on one side, but it's going so fast, you know, greater than 2,000 feet per second, and it has enough velocity to go out the other side after passing through that tissue, then it's probably going to create enough upset that's going to be a wrap.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
So I don't see those generally. Yeah. I mean, I don't see those in the emergency room. I still see those in a law enforcement capacity, but not here. More as a crime scene, but not as patients that we're treating.
Yeah. And something that people probably need to bear in mind, the people that you are seeing are the people that survived the initial shot.
Yeah.
So kind of a fun little fact there.
Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of a weird thing. Like I think Chuck, you know, understands this. You probably understand this too, is sometimes I have to think and remind myself, like, what hat am I wearing right now?
Yeah.
You know, like what am I doing? Okay. Yeah, that's right. I'm not involved in the law enforcement side of this right now. If I find anything, of course, I'm going to preserve it as though it's crime scene evidence, but I don't have any role in the enforcement capacity here, you know, and I'm just in the rescuer capacity, or at that point, you know, the medical capacity. So it's kind of a funny thing. So a lot of people don't really get that, you know, it's hard to you know, figuratively speaking, like holster that guy sometimes and you know, just focus on the reconstructive and rehabilitative efforts there.
Yeah. Now I know a hot topic that Chuck loves to discuss is
wad cutters and 38s.
That too, which I have. Where light for caliber, fast and light for caliber pistol projectiles. That looks awesome on gel, kind of.
Yeah, actually, the last shot, Chuck, that's what we talked about, and then we also, I don't mean to talk over you, Chuck, but that's actually what we talked about, and then Chuck was teaching a class where he had a block of gel and some denim, and I had just gotten some of these. I believe they're branded by Ruger, and they're called like a ARX.
ARX, yep.
and they're like perhaps made of like some type of compressed metal fused.
There's some weird.
They look neat. They look like a drill bit. And I think they were 95 grain 38s, super low recoil, obviously, because there's nothing there. We shot them both out of, I think, Chuck's LCR, my 681, and then also out of a 20-inch lever gun into the ballistic gelatin. And that kind of gives you I'm no ballistician like Chuck is, but I think that's a really neat, in terms of comparison's sake, going from what is it, 1 7/8 inch barrel to a 4-inch, 20-inch barrel, you really get to see the full spectrum that things do. And as Chuck and I both kind of know and sort of like wink at each other about is, lever guns like these 38s, 357s, and then everything in the 43 to 45 caliber Magnum pistol rounds do crazy things out of lever guns. I mean, really things that people probably underestimate. And at that particular class, we also had some 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow points and 357 that I brought. And we shot those into the gelatin block at the same distance. We shot 123 grain Wolf out of AKM, and the results were identical. So, it's kind of
identical out of the AKM and out of the lever, right? Not out of the pistols.
Yeah. Well, with the lever. Yeah. Yeah. Lever 357, not comparing we didn't do the snub and the but out of the lever, the lever had comparable results to the AKM. So, we always joke about the cowboy assault rifle, but the ballistic results were the same, and so I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Did you guys happen to chrono that as well?
We didn't, but I've done it before.
How close are they?
Remington duty load when I was carrying a revolver was a 125 grain Remington, the full power. They make a mid range, and my gun was fast. Some guns are a little faster than others. Like Glocks tend to chronograph faster because of the polyagonal rifling. My Ruger Security 6 4-inch was running about 1490 with that load when Book was about 1450. And then out of my buddy's 20-inch Marlin carbine, it was doing 2,200 feet per second.
Cool.
So you got a 125 grain bullet, 2,200 feet per second. That's literally, the weight and velocity of an AK round.
Yeah.
There's going to be some variables in that. It won't have as much reach because it doesn't have the ballistic coefficient. It's not as aerodynamic, things like that. But at close range, all the ballistic potential of each of those bullets would be very, very similar, determined by bullet construction more than anything.
That is cool.
And you take some of those things, like Sherman had did you bring a 44 mag or a 45 Colt? You brought a big thumper one time.
Yeah, I had a 45 Colt. That trip I had a 20-inch Rossi 357 and then a 16-inch Rossi and 45 Colt as well. Mm-hmm.
If you get into the non-low velocity loads, like 44 Magnums, the souped up 45s like you get from Garrett or places like that, and you put them through a carbine, 44 Magnums easily pick up 400 to 600 feet per second. So you get a 44 Magnum out of a carbine can equal some of the old Buffalo rifle loads from the black powder days, which people look back at that technology, but you know what? They would shoot through buffaloes pretty regularly.
That is crazy. But it kind of goes back to some of the stuff we've talked about in the past about lever actions ballistically being very similar to AK 7.62 by 3.9. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm guessing
there's some cool, I don't know what you'd call it. Like, I guess it's turning into old man wisdom kind of thing where, with these older, what we now have is like evolutions of what were originally black powder era cartridges and black powder era guns. With smokeless powder, you can do some really, really, really cool stuff. I mean, in the last few years, I've really gotten into 45-70 stuff for just general purpose, whether shooting pigs or for all kinds of stuff. And that's another really versatile round that you can go from, anti-personnel, and very, very mild loadings, similar to what they used during the Civil War and after, all the way up to, what you can get now, like, Chuck was talking about with Garrett loads and Buffalo Bore and some of those ones where it's darn near, 500 grain projectiles that are moving at, close to 2,000 feet per second and just can literally kill anything on the planet. It's insane.
Yeah, literally, some of the modern 45-70 loads are literally elephant gun capable. They're up there with the old Nitro Express and things like that.
Yeah, in a gun that weighs like 6 pounds, 6.5 pounds, and is relatively short, and you can put an aim point on or a scout scope or whatever you want, and have a very capable. I always kind of say, like, it's almost like having a 12 gauge that can shoot rifled slugs, except you can shoot them out to like 200 yards with pretty good accuracy. After that, they sort of fall off. The trajectory gets pretty steep, but within 200, they still hit like very, very, very hard and very predictably.
What surprised me with a 45-70 was the recoil was not as bad as I thought it would be. I don't even think it's as bad as a 12 gauge Magnum slug. It's just a push.
Yeah. It's worse off the bench, like anything, but I think that, if you're standing and you get your weight behind it, like, it's not that bad at all.
Yeah.
I was going to say 12 gauge slugs, especially the old full power ones, are very underappreciated as far as recoil. I picked up a 590 years ago, and the only thing I could find at the store was 3-inch Magnum, 1.25 ounce slugs. And I have fired guns as large as, like 375 H&H and several of the 45 caliber elephant guns, I'm trying to think of like outright the biggest elephant gun bullet I've fired. Like I know I fired a 5.77 Nitro, and that Magnum slug out of that Mossberg shotgun recoiled harder than anything I've ever shot in my life. It was horrible. Don't buy 3-inch Magnum slugs. That's stupid.
So we were just shooting, I don't know if they were 3-inch Magnums or 2 3/4, but some kind of heavy Magnum or heavy slug just a couple days through my 1301. And we were, I think it was like 45 yards clearing the pie plates. It was just fun. Of course, we were using a red dot and cheating, but yeah, going to do that with lever guns next.
So we got, if you guys don't mind, I was going to circle back because I saw a couple of the chat
Please.
things. So the two things I saw was every once in a while I sent victims, however they got shot. Maybe they're a legitimate victim, gangbanger, gunfight, something like that. Whatever the case may be, somebody got shot. Sometimes I would send people to guys like Sherman. And then the ones that he didn't see had two. There were two sides of the coin. The guys that were DRT, which we saw quite a bit of, because as he noted, if you take something like a 9mm ball, 40 caliber flat point, something like that, or even some of the small caliber stuff with a good hit, people are literally dead in their tracks. You get that flaccid paralysis and they drop like a puppet falling. But then the other guys that I would run into really regularly, he'd show up on a call. Sometimes it was a shooting, sometimes it was an unknown disturbance. And you walk up and some guy's got a bloody rag on his head and be like, "What happened? Dude shot me." And I've lost track of how many times we have the thing that Jim Cirillo talked about. And if you hadn't read your Jim Cirillo, you need to. Guns, Bullets, and Gunfights is mandatory reading in this business. But like a case, Sherm, you remember the 200 rounds or 200 grain super police, the The Winchester load.
Yep.
Neither super nor a police load, but
Right.
It had a very hemispherical bullet on the nose, very, very round, and was going. I've chronographed some of the original ammo. It was sub 600 feet per second. So the idea was a big bullet with a lot of dwell time, would have stopping power. But one of my old chiefs shot a guy here and here, and both of them got into the tissue, hit bone, and then because the shape of the projectile just traveled under the tissue and then exited out the back. And he was in a running gunfight with this guy. Oddly enough, what made the guy drop, because he had a Walther P38, a World War II gun. He was shooting at the guy, or he was shooting at our chief, and they were working around a car. And the chief in that 3-shot burst when he hit him. One of the bullets had hit him in the arm, and it bounced off the humerus and cut the brachial artery on the way out. So eventually this guy just bled enough, he passed out. And, that was the end of the gunfight. But that sort of thing where somebody got hit and it just travels around. And I've seen that, people talk caliber crap, 9mm, or they suck and blah, blah, blah. I distinctly remember one. It was a double shooting, really, really tragic case because they're very legitimate victims. It was a carjacking robbery. They got followed home. 2 ladies were in a car. One of them got shot side to side through the chest with a 45 caliber, 230 grain full metal jacket. She died on the scene. The other gal was being accosted by one of the other bad guys. And when they killed the first gal, he's like, well, we can't leave any witnesses, and shot her in the back of the head, like execution style. And she had enough wits about her. She collapsed and played dead. So that 45 caliber round hit the back of her head, went over the top and popped out. And of course, head wounds bleed all over the place. And she just laid there and held her breath. So they thought she was dead and they took off. I've seen that with 40 cals. There's a case I talk about where we had a shooting in front of a club, and the guy got hit, heard the shot, got hit, looked back, saw the guy with the gun, and then probably did one of the world's fastest 400-yard dashes. So I'm talking to him after the fact. I was a night shift watch commander. I got guys down at the club. I'd already been to the scene, so we knew what kind of gun we were looking for because we had 45 caliber brass laying there. And the guy's got a rag on the back of his head, and talking to his buddies, and he's like, man, I'm lucky. That dude must have had a 22 or something. And I told him, no, you got shot with a 40, man. You're really lucky. And he looks at me and he goes, what? And I go, yeah, it was a 40 caliber pistol. And I see his eyes go big, and then he passed out. He literally fainted over the thought of it. But I've lost track of how many times I've seen that, just over and over and over again. It was something well documented that Jim Cirillo very well documented. And a big part of that is bullet construction, bullet shape, which is why Jim was such a fan. I was lucky enough to train with Jim several times and to be able to call him a friend, be able to bounce stupid questions off of him, things like that. And that round nose shape, when you think about it, it glances off of things, travels through tissue very efficiently without tearing things, stuff like that. And as Sherman noted, you got some very, very hard bone. When I'm in impact weapon class, when I'm talking about, this part of the skull, it's angled like tank armor. It's very thick. It's very hard. It's almost as though it were specifically designed to protect your brain from impact. It's just weird that way, right? And then on top of that, the tissue acts as a lube. So think about if you're shooting a steel plate and you have those angled steel plates, so the bullets they're very predictably hit the plate, go down, hit the plate, go down. Well, it's the same thing with a skull, particularly if you go grease the plate so that it's got, some lubricant on it, which is what we're dealing with here. So like when I teach headshots, let's go back to our Star Wars nerd roots. especially with small calibers, I teach people you have to be like Luke at the Death Star. He just wasn't pounding torpedoes into the Death Star. You have to shoot like for the exhaust port or some place where the torpedo is actually going to get in there.
Negative. It only impacted on the surface.
Luke didn't get that though. Luke used the Force.
I think Red 5 blew that one.
No, he was Red 5.
Oh,
gosh,
okay.
Come on,
I don't
Sherm.
remember who it was then. Sorry,
bud.
Screw that up.
Now we're going to have to pull up the original and watch that again.
Right. I think we have to cancel the whole ModCast now.
Maybe it was Gold Leader. Now it was Gold Leader. That's what it was.
Could be.
Yeah. Kind of a follow on, and then, of course, this is just all anecdotal stuff. But it seems like what Chuck was saying is a lot of these folks that are, they tend to come from the other side of the tracks, that are part of the criminal element, that are gunshot wound survivors. They've been shot like more than once. And so we had a case the other day where we were trying to find this guy. He came to us for treatment of a ameloblastoma, which is a benign type of tumor, which is actually probably more destructive than a cancerous type tumor would be. But we had to remove a whole section of his jaw, basically from the corners of his mouth down. So he just has like almost like the Predator, like when the Predator opened his mouth and his mandible open like this. So there's nothing connecting it. So we needed to find a graft site somewhere on his body where we could take a bone and a blood supply to be able to graft this back and turn it back into a jaw. Well, every place that we looked on his imaging, he'd been shot before. So he'd been shot in the tibial plateaus of both legs. He'd been shot in the ribs on both sides. He'd basically been shot in all the places that we would normally use for grafting sites. And I thought that was funny just because, this guy was, retired from that life largely. He's in his early 60s. And, probably what's going to end up being his demise is this, bizarre type of benign tumor. But boy, it wasn't for lack of trying, because, he had about 9 projectiles still lodged in his body at various points, all, of course, like medium or small caliber and non-expanding.
Truthfully, I think when you get into small bullets, we talked about like the 38 snubs, things like that. If you need to carry something really small, Ruger LCP, 38 snub, things like that. The idea of expanding bullets can be very highly overrated. We know that I think the idea that the FBI learned the hard way in 1986 that your bullet needs to penetrate sufficiently. So the first thing I look for in ammo is, does it work? It's got to go bang instead of click, right? Is it going to function in the gun? The next thing I look for is, does it shoot accurately to my sights? That's what I'm really worried about. And if I've got those things, functions in the gun, recoil, not crazy recoil, things like that. Because I can get something that penetrates sufficiently and shoots very accurately to my sights, but do I really want to carry a 4.54 Casole? But things that we normally carry, and like when I'm picking ammo for my 38 snubs, is it reliable? Does it shoot accurately to the sights? And then the next thing I worry about is any kind of wound ballistics. So there are some of my guns, some of my smaller guns, I'm carrying non-expanding ammunition in on purpose, knowing the limitations of the gun that I'm carrying. And then some of those that are non-traditional, like wad cutters have a 38 snub, they actually have some advantages over expanding ammunition in that they won't overexpand and underpenetrate, and then they don't have that ricochet effect where they tend to stick. That's something that Jim learned early on when he was live fire testing in the middle of real world incidents.
Yeah.
Just reinforces that whole that thing about wad cutters. What?
Yeah, I agree with Chuck. I think wad cutters are just neat for a number of reasons. Aside from their terminal ballistic effects, I mean, I have yet. I'm primarily a Smith & Wesson guy, but also I do have a few of the old school Rugers like Chuck's talking about that were service pistols, and then also LCRs. But I have yet to find a 357/38 caliber revolver that has either fixed or of course with adjustable sights, it doesn't matter, but with fixed sights that I can't get good point of aim, point of impact coherence with. And they are almost like boringly predictable. They're great for new shooters too, because you're generally shooting them out of either aluminum or, and even in aluminum guns, they're not that punishing. Out of steel frame guns, they're very mild. About the worst thing about them is that they're crappy for speed loaders or for speed strips, but if you, the chances of you having to reload, I mean, how often does that happen in real life outside of law enforcement incursions? And even then, if you're a guy who opts to wear or, carry wad cutters for your revolver, you maybe could be worse off to carry your spare ammo in loops, and then you can carry wad cutters to your heart's content.
Or just carry another revolver.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Regardless of what you're carrying, I'm a big believer in, especially if you're carrying at work, I'm a big believer in carrying two guns because there's a lot of things, in the age of ammo droughts and people working, ammo machines running 365 days a year around the clock, trying to catch up with demand and things like that. Quality control takes a kick in the butt. And so your odds of getting bad ammunition rise. And there are certain things like a squib load, you got a bullet lodged in the bore, you blow up your gun because it's an overcharge, something like you can't tap rack and keep going on any of those issues. It's not uncommon to get your gun shot. If you look at the FBI Miami fight or, a number of other fights that I can point to, people got shot in the gun hand, they got shot in the gun, they got shot in the gun and their gun disabled, being able to grab something else. So even if it's a less capable gun, so that somebody can't just walk up and execute you, is a pretty good idea. Yep. Especially since some of these guns are they're so easy to carry, Stonos 38 in the pocket, something like a Glock 42 strapped to your body armor strap, something like that. It's very, very easy to have something with almost no load and almost no inconvenience to your lifestyle. It's like putting a pocket knife in your pocket. It's just there.
Agreed.
So we haven't talked about rifle stuff much, especially as far as striking the face. Yeah. Now, when you were talking about low velocity rifle, what's the window that you're classifying that as?
Well, probably just by, it's hard to say because I don't always know like what it was fired with, but I'm guessing less than 1,000 feet per second. And maybe even that's a little strong to the hoop, maybe even like 700 feet per second or less. Unless you're in some of the higher velocity 22 long rifle type rounds, which are still probably right around there out of most pistols, I think. Isn't that about right, Chuck? Even like for velocitors and things like that, aren't they right around 1,000?
Yeah. The fastest bullets I've found, 22 snubs, are going to be the velocitors and the stingers, and they'll push up around 1,000, but almost everything else, real world guns that I've shot, short barrel 22s, 32s, 380s, things like Ruger LCPs, that they don't achieve book velocity at all. And then quite frankly, neither do the snub 38s or like the very short 45s. I can remember those when the officers models were popular, things like Glock 36s,
45.
Bullet velocity can drop, easily into the high 600, low 700 feet per second range pretty easy. I can tell you that if you got good bullet design or decent mass, that even some unexpected things can be surprisingly capable. I'll tell you, every 22 rifle shooting that I've attended, and I think it's one reason is because the most ubiquitous 22 long rifle loading has been a high-speed solid 40 grain. So you get a 40 grain solid bullet. It doesn't expand at these velocities, running about 1,200 feet per second. But every 22 rifle shooting that I've attended has been a homicide without fail, every single one. And the vast majority of them, people are like, well, I'm telling it, like they hit the dude once good, and the guy ran and piled up like a dead deer, It can be surprisingly effective, which in my opinion speaks to accuracy, how easy is it to shoot a 22 rifle? Even people that don't know how to use the sights tend to point shoot a long barrel gun fairly well. You have a close range event. But if you have accurate hits with a bullet that penetrates sufficiently, that's probably 99% of the problem.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the one specific that I can think of, Chuck might know about this one. I don't know if we've talked about this before, Chuck, but I think you know about it. This occurred in Spokane, Washington, approximately 2002. There was an active shooter. Let's call it a active shooter non-event, because the active shooter was the only person that was shot. Young, disturbed man went to a high school in Spokane, Washington, went to his classroom. There was some type of, confrontation. He didn't actually shoot anybody, if I recall. And then the Spokane police, I think they did kind of like the TAC team on patrol type concept, because, Spokane is quite the Wild West out there. And this, the purported active shooter was shot, I believe 3 times in the face with XTP out of 16-inch carbines, or it might even been commando length carbines. But anyway, he lost both eyes, most of his mid face, and some structures in the neck. However, all of them were non-lethal wounds. Of course, he was, essentially crippled because he was, blind. His orbits were evacuated from his skull. So was his nose, and a lot of his respiratory structure had to be salvaged as best as possible. But he went on to, attempt suicide in the ICU by any number of means. A number of times, because, he was pretty much doomed from then on. But I always thought that was kind of an interesting case, because these were all like, obviously skilled shooters, not a huge distance that they shot him from, like probably within 10 yards. And, around the Hornady, and, which is thought of in law enforcement circles as kind of being the gold standard in a lot of places still, but relatively incapacitating, of course, but not lethal.
So did they use carbines? Was that a 223 deal, or?
I feel like they maybe had like 10.5 or maybe 12-inch guns, like back when those Colt 6920s or whatever that was were available for individual officer purchase. I remember that was kind of a big trend in Washington at the time. But I feel like it was that combined with that round.
So we had and I'm consulting on a shooting locally where we had very poor performance out of one of the bullets that Doc Roberts would warn against for use in patrol. It was in this case Hornady Tap 55 grain, which is a very frangible bullet.
Yeah.
One of the things that sold the 223, the 5.56 system to law enforcement when we were pushing patrol rifles was, everybody's worried, oh my God, you'll shoot through schools and that sort of thing. And so you could do ammo demos, ballistic gel and things like that to show it was very controlled, very actually limited penetration, penetrates less than service pistol ammunition. So that got rifles on the street. But then we started seeing problems with bullets failing to penetrate windshields, bullets failing to penetrate deep enough on really big suspects, things like that, because they weren't anywhere near that FBI 12-inch minimum. And when you think about the bullet was made to self-destruct in something like a prairie dog, because you want the bullet to kill the prairie dog very cleanly, or if you miss, you don't want to ricochet it off a rock and send it into the farm next door or something like that. So the bullets are doing what they're designed to do. You have limited penetration in some of these rounds. And I've seen teams using things as low as 40 grain ammo, some of those varmint rounds, trying to get, they're scared to death of over penetration. And the bullets just explode on the first thing they hit. So if you think about skull construction, if you hit like a cheekbone or a jaw or something like that, and that bullet's going to self-destruct and stop within a couple inches, there may not be enough penetration to get through to get a really debilitating hit.
Yeah. I misspoke when I said that, Chuck. I said XTP, but you're right. It was the Tap now that I think about it. And I feel like out of that particular gun, I feel like the combination of that round and that gun, I remember seeing, I think it only did like 7.5 or 8 inches in calibrated gelatin. It was like very, very, very anemic. And you're exactly right. Like that's what happened with this particular incident was, as soon as those bullets impacted, near the orbital rim, it was just instant disintegration and just basically like liquefying and avulsing everything that was in there. So, it just kind of looked like everything from like his eyebrows, down to right about mid mandible was just sort of turned to mush. So yeah, everything in there, I think is, when you're talking about shot placement earlier and the proton torpedo, I also think that the further you get off the midline in a head-on situation, or if you're in a lateral view, the further you deviate from the midline of that, basically staying in line with the external auditory meatus, your ear hole, if you will, and then the same thing on the back of the skull. Anything that you deviate from center really decreases your chances of effectiveness. Midline structures, they are where all of everything important is. And also those are the worst areas to heal. A lot of times the blood supply there is really good, but it overlaps in a weird way and it doesn't heal well, so a lot of times if you have people that have even been shot there, but they end up, not dying in the immediate, they'll die of secondary complications just because of the problems involved with the, healing complications. So.
When I'm teaching, particularly with handguns, when I'm teaching the whole like headshot thing, talk about how small these targets are, I think particularly in the past, we shot in the police world at unrealistically large targets. Even if you're going for center of mass, your human being's heart is roughly about the size of their fist. If I raise my thumb, it's kind of like the aortic arch. You put it there in the center of your chest, you realize how small a target that is to be very effective. You can poke holes in lungs and quite a few of them before you start to have some effect, and that can take a while. But if you think of like a Halloween jack-o'-lantern or like a skull, like a cartoon of a skull, like when I was in sniper school, they were very adamant that we shoot for this T-zone. And you think of a skull, what it looks like without the tissue. You got the nose hole and you got the eye holes, and those are those Death Star exhaust ports that lead to what you're trying to shoot actually. So that's what I teach to aim for, and it's a very small area.
Yeah, the last time I trained with you, Chuck, you were still using that. You were using that VTAC target that has like the little credit card, and I think that's if you can
very good target.
Yeah, I think that's a good, very good analog for that. Like very few people are from the lateral portion of their orbit to the other side is going to be, much bigger than a credit card. And I'd say that even when I think about that, I even think about from like what we call like the basically what is like the outer edge of your iris on both sides. And if you look and you draw a line on bald guys like us, Chuck, you can see that stops almost right at the division or the union of the frontal portion, the frontal bone of our skull, and the parietal and the temporal all kind of connects right there. So that's by design, like you said. And if you sink one in there, the chances of it going laterally far enough out to the side and escape without hitting anything major is very, very slim. If it's inside the pupils, that's a money shot.
So I was taking Jared Reston's pistol class. I think it would have been last year. And I think to avoid any complications about being politically incorrect, Jared's target is Jared. So his target, and so it's a picture of Jared, and it's got like the area that you're shooting for. And he's walking by coaching people. He walks by, and one of the guys had honked on the trigger when we were going for headshots, and hit him right here. And he walks by, and he just said, "Dude, those jaw shots don't work," and walked off.
Yeah,
that was. It was funny in context, big time, but Ed definitely knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Firsthand experience or something.
And that's another case, we were talking about small calibers. Jared got like shot in the face with a 45. And that was his notice that he was being invited to a gunfight. And he was able to prevail. A lot of mindset, things like that. But also, when you hit jaw, when you hit teeth, that's any pistol bullet is going to have a whole lot of trouble impacting that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sherman, but teeth are, as far as like hardness, probably the hardest thing on your body.
That's correct. Yeah, that's the hardest thing in your body. Yeah, 96% inorganic. So. That's a good point. I was going to say, Chuck, that you've seen this case before, Chuck, because I put it in my presentation, but I had a patient that actually walked into my office when I was still working in the hood and in a different hood. Now I work in the north. Before I worked in the south, but when I was working there, a guy actually walked in, and his chief complaint was, I got shot in the face, but now I'm having trouble with water coming out my nose when I drink water, and I can't open my mouth. And so, whether there's any veracity to the background of this story or not, I'll leave it up to you. But because I can't firsthand verify it, I just know what the end result was. But he had a small laceration underneath his right eye. The bullet, which on examination this is one of the few, Matt, that I've seen that was actually with an expanding projectile. But this wasn't this shooting didn't occur in the United States. Apparently that occurred in Mexico. And then the guy immediately exfiltrated the country and came to the United States where he thought he'd be safe. That's his story, but I can't, say whether it's true or not. But anyway, shot underneath the eye with the hydroshock. It went in. hit the posterior portion of the rearmost portion of his maxillary sinus, kind of did a loop-de-loop, and spun down. And if you imagine, if you put your fingers on top of your rearmost teeth and you kind of push your finger back a little bit further, there is a piece of bone that sticks down called your maxillary tuberosity. And that's actually the base of your skull. That's the rearmost portion of the upper part of your head. It blew that part out along with that piece of bone, along with 3 teeth attached to it. He either spit that out or he swallowed it. I'm not sure which. But that creates a pretty big wound that bleeds a lot because there's there's your maxillary artery there that is feeding that. And that's a good sized bleeder. So he bled quite a bit from that, but then the bullet, after it hit those teeth and that bone, then it did kind of a funky thing where I don't think that the hydroshock would normally do this if it had hit something else, but the pointy portion with the post of the lead spun off in one direction and the jacket stayed on the other side. So he actually had a piece of the jacket portion lodged on one side and then the lead portion lodged on the other. And and it spun from one side of his mouth to the other, but it didn't go through his cheek, and it locked itself up on the inside of the lateral condyle. And that's what was like, basically, if like a wheel chock or a door chock was kind of keeping his mouth from being able to open because he couldn't, allow his musculature to pull his jaw forward to open his mouth. So he was just drinking out of a straw, but when he would drink out of a straw, it would all come out his nose because he had this communication now between his nose and his mouth. So it required some surgery and some grafting repair, and it was a mess. But, the moral of the story is he literally got shot at point blank range, maybe even contact distance. It was hard to tell from the wound, but it wouldn't have surprised me. And he got, he lived. He was, disfigured and debilitated and is going to have a lot of problems for the rest of his life with his jaw and his speech. But he lived. So that's a kind of a strange, one of those weird ones too, where if you would have told me, hey, here's the crime scene. This guy walked up, puts a 1911 right up to underneath this guy's eye, says F you and pulls the trigger. And then this guy wakes up 5 minutes later, bleeding out his nose and his mouth and his face, and, grabs a towel and some bandages, packs a bag, and heads from Mexico to Austin to Amarillo to Nashville. I'd be like, okay, that's an awesome fairy tale, where does the rest of this movie take us? But it's like, no, this is real life. So just kind of a weird sort of thing. But, and then that story kind of came full circle for me because that happened in about 2014, I believe it was. I have to look at the article when I originally wrote it, but that happened. And then I was at TACCon in 2019, and I was at Dr. Topper's lecture on ballistics, and he pulls that up and he starts giving kind of a case review of that. And and the facts were a little bit wrong. Well, not a little bit wrong. They were wrong. And so I raised my hand and I said, well, that's not completely true. And it kind of reminded me of that scene in the old 1989 movie Batman. Remember, like, where they were in his armory and they were like making fun of all of his suits of armor. And he says, this guy must have been king of the Wicker people. And Bruce Wayne walks up and he goes, actually, it's Japanese. And he goes, yeah, well, how do you know? And he goes, because I bought it in Japan. So it was kind of like that. So then Dr. Topper was like, hey, well, come on up here and tell us about this case. And so I did. And then I sent him my notes and he changed his presentation. So it's kind of funny because it was one of these ones where, the urban legend became, a guy got shot in the face with a 230 grain federal hydroshock, and all it did was make him go to the dentist. Well, kind of, but not really. There was a lot more to it than that. And it's not like he showed up and I flossed his teeth and he went home or something like that.
It's just a regular routine cleaning.
Yeah. We just buffed out a couple spots and on his way.
Here's your free toothbrush. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for dropping by.
Yeah. And believe it or not like the time that a gunshot wound victim came to the office directly after happening. Another time it was a guy that had been shot 3 times with a 22, not anywhere near the face. Once in the femoral, once in the shoulder, and once in the subclavian artery. And, it was shot up here, but it was bleeding from the subclavian artery. And that was one that, resulted in tourniquet application and Nashville Fire Department and Police Department showing up. So that was like Chuck said, I don't think that guy survived. He had already lost like a tremendous amount of blood. And when they rolled up, he was sitting in the passenger seat of a Honda Civic. And when they opened the door and blood actually fell out of the door, like he dropped it like a water balloon, I was like, wow. I mean, it was a tremendous amount. So same kind of thing. In that case, that guy was actually in some type of love triangle kind of thing, like a lot of these things are. And a guy was rolled up to his work site because he was with 2 other of his buddies, and they were all wearing fluorescent orange, hard hats and construction equipment. And the guy said, screw you, sir. And bang, bang, bang. And the guy fell off the roof, and then his buddies collected him in the car and drove him to the nearest place where they could get medical attention, which was us. So I'm either really lucky or really unlucky, but maybe they're lucky. I'm not quite sure.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I think it's a mindset issue, and not everybody gets to carry what they want. I've talked about this before. I've done like Facebook posts, had a conversation with Caleb Giddings. He wrote a deal for his blog on this, and the whole idea, it's been going around my whole career. Man, you're carrying a 38, you're going to be killed in the streets, or, you're carrying a 9mm. And back in the day, we needed to get 40s, we needed to get 45s, we needed to get 357 SIGs, all of these things, and are looking for a hardware solution to a software problem. And it's just out of touch with reality. I've seen 45s fail, 9mm fail, 357 Magnums fail. Like Uncle Pat talked about, he's seen a lot of people turned into canoes by 22s, 32s, 380s. And so when you're talking about a failure to stop event, then the first thing you have to look at is what critical structures in the person who was shot were involved, because, a 44 Magnum to the pinky toe is a pinky toe. I mean, that's all there is to it, right? One of the reasons I bring this up is I have a buddy on a very high action police department right now, and they have 9mm, and some of the troops, they've had a number of officer involved shootings, are like, well, this is BS. We need to get this bullet, we need to do. No, the bullets work fine, guys. If you shoot people around the edges, it really doesn't work. That's all there is to it. One of the incidents that I talk about is my dad was a Vietnam vet. He was in an air cavalry unit in his last tour in Vietnam. And I met one of the guys that he flew with in Vietnam, Mr. Shimke, and he was a Cobra pilot at the time. Cobras are tandem, and that, the pilot's back here and the gunner sits in front. It's a very narrow aircraft. So one bad day in Vietnam, they took a bunch of rounds while they were shooting up bunker complex, and it was either 12.7 or 50 cal, whatever it was, but went through the front of the aircraft, killed the gunner, went all the way through Mr. Shimke, and then shot his engine out of his Cobra, and he dropped out of the sky. So he took 250 caliber rounds, and they were right here and here, right? And then when I met him, I was a grade school kid, and my dad was assigned to a unit in Germany. And I saw Mr. Shimke, we had a bunch of people, we were in a pool, and he looked like he had 3 belly buttons from the scarring, and 2 of them on his back. So he lost about 8 feet of intestine out of that deal. but he was still healthy enough to be on flight status.
Wow.
And ironically, he crawled out of his aircraft and was trying to get away. And pilots were high value. Like if you captured a pilot, it was a big deal. You know, we some of the incidents we know about, like Bat 21 and things like that. You know, but ironically, he carried a Colt Woodsman 22 in a tanker holster when he was flying, and he killed a guy with that as part of his escape. So we had basically a failure to stop with 250 caliber rounds through a dude's torso because they didn't hit anything that was immediately vital to his life function. You know, he lost a intestine, he lost a lot of tissue, lost a lot of blood, but he was healthy enough to be back on flight status once he was healed up, you know. And when people ascribe some of these things to, well, that's because, you know, this. No, you have to look at what happened. You know, the 9mm got a really bad rap after the 1986 Miami gunfight with the FBI. But I'll tell you what, you know, everybody blamed it on the 9mm. We need to get whatever. Had they been carrying 45 caliber silver tips, which were also invented and introduced at the same time as the 9mm silver tip, they had even worse penetration. They would have had less effect on Platt when he got shot. But I'm telling you that people wouldn't have said, well, we need to dump the 45. It sucks. They would have said, we need to get better bullets. And that's where this kind of mindset thing gets really annoying. They're not death rays. You know, at my old job, we ended up shooting a lot of people with 124 grain plus P 9mm gold dots. And we never had a bullet failure. They always performed the way they always mushroomed. They always penetrated sufficiently. They did really good through intermediate barriers. It's just a superb load. One of my guys got into a chase, car crashed. Bad guy jumped out of the car with a pistol in each hand and was running, angling away, and then trying to like shoot backwards. So our guy hit the bad guy through the scapula, and then it came out as pec. So as far as like critical structures, it went through the lung, but it didn't hit like the pulmonary artery or any of the big bleeders or anything like that. Our guy, because he was tracking the guy running, he said when he fired, the suspect immediately collapsed, and he said it was like the rhino on 300. The guy was sliding on his face in the dirt. So after that, some of the guys came into the armory and they're like, man, when are we going to get 45s? This is bullshit. And I asked them to explain to me where in the instantaneous incapacitation of that suspect that the bullet failed.
Right.
Whoa, you know, as Sherman knows, that modern emergency medicine and trauma medicine is very good. There are people who are alive now who would be homicide victims 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There's no possible way they would have survived. So we can't ascribe lethality as a thing with bullets. I mean, they either do what we design them to do or they don't. And then what it hits on the person is I mean, part of it's a marksmanship problem, part of it's a slightly random, but when medical technology works, I don't know what we're upset about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was a point that Jeff Carpenter explained years ago to me that I really appreciated, because I was trying to tell my department, hey, we should probably go to 9s and ditch 40s. And this was, I don't remember how long it was, but basically it was, well, consider all the gunshot wounds or all the dead bodies that you have to deal with. How many would be more dead because they were using a different caliber? None. Yeah. And what would that little tiny difference between the projectiles really, is someone going to die because of that little tiny difference? No, it's shot placement.
Yeah. And like Chuck was saying, I think that, you know, even my experience with that guy had been shot with the hydroshock, you know, from a 45, like anybody that's a learned person in this industry knows that, you know, 45 caliber hydroshocks tend to do a pretty good job if they're delivered correctly. But even in that guy's case, you know, a shot to the face, And then he was incapacitated for what he reports had a loss of consciousness for 5 minutes. So in that time, does that give a regular person, a regular civilian defender, as I call them, time to leave the scene, and get to an area of safety and call for law enforcement? Absolutely. In a law enforcement context, would that be enough time to effect an arrest? Absolutely. I don't know about the military context, but I mean, if you're trying to kill somebody, then I guess that didn't accomplish that mission. But in what we're concerned with, as far as law enforcement or civilian capacity, I don't see that as a failure of a 45 or a failure of a hydroshock at all. I think that was 100% effective. And then just kind of like to tag along about Chuck's story with the Cobra shooting is what's crazy and sticks out to me that I feel is like the stinger on the end of that story, Chuck, is that he took 2 50 cals to the torso and then he clipped a dude with a 22 and killed him, so that's crazy. That's great.
Yeah, that's the really ironical part of that story was how it went down. He's carrying a Colt Woodsman and it's 22.
Yeah.
They were issued 38 revolvers and he had that gun. So he carried that because that's what he liked, because he was a really good shot with it. He didn't have that gun anymore because when they evac'd him, he ended up losing it. Somebody's probably got a really cool souvenir, but later in life, I had occasion to go shooting with him, and that dude could shoot. I think he had a Ruger by then, but guns like that, he could shoot. Shoot thumbtacks on drop. When it was time to change the bullseye target, he would shoot the thumbtacks out and let it drop, and then go up and put another one in. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And talking about, again, the proton torpedo and the shot placement, I mean, those Cobras are literally only like a yard wide. I mean, guys like our size, when you sit in it, if you put your arms at your side, your elbows are touching the side walls of the cockpit. That's a tiny aircraft to be able to lace 2 50 calibers right center line. That's insane.
Yeah, they, he told me they were going down doing a recon by fire type of thing, and they were shooting up a bunker complex looking for a reaction. And Unfortunately, they got more than they expected,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess my point is, I think it's a failure in mindset to describe victory or loss to these sorts of variables. If you look at, Audie Murphy was carrying ball ammo. Sergeant York was carrying ball ammo. Jim Cirillo, for quite a bit of his career, was carrying round-nosed lead. Pat Rogers never carried a jacketed hollow point on duty during his entire career. And that's he talked about pistol effectiveness and things like that, and having long conversations with him. He had a incident in Vietnam where he double tapped a guy 3 times in a row before the guy stayed down, and he was using an M14 rifle when he did it. So he shot a guy 6 times with a .308, and the guy kept getting back up.
That's because it was an M14.
It deducts damage points from the projectiles.
Yeah, exactly.
But with his 38 semi-wad cutters that he carried as a cop, he said, you know what? They work pretty good if you can shoot. And I think that's the secret, is it all works pretty good if you can shoot for the most part. And none of it works pretty good if you can't. Yeah. I think there's dumb stuff out there. Sherman was talking about that Ruger ARX. It's an underweight plastic round nose bullet that does minimal damage, no more so than full metal jackets or, the RIP bullets or Glazer safety slugs, things that fragment.
Well, all these have marketing, and they're all very appealing to lowest common denominator users who don't shoot, who don't study, who don't put in their due diligence, because there, as this whole discussion has shown, there's so much nuance, and it's not just this round that's gonna save it or save the gunfight. It's not this gun, it's the whole package, to include myself in my training and being able to apply that.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Like, I hate to, quote myself, but at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about there being, that I said one of the things that fascinates me about, looking at the terminal effects of all this is, actually analyzing the science, but removing all of the humanness, all of the emotion and the political correctness and all this from it. And when you look at things like with an unjaded eye like that, and just looking at it in terms of scientific criteria, that means things that are measurable. And you look at it in the smallest terms, which is the movement of electrons, then you really look at this in a way that removes all of that. And that's the difference between people that are, true technicians of this craft. And I don't mean technician in a pejorative sense at all.
No.
Or, actual students of this and understand how all of the moving pieces work, why, the things like the gimmick bullets of, gimmick bullets, I don't think that a lot of people realize are not anything, new.
No. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, that's something that Chuck harps on all the time, and people just, they don't listen.
Yeah. I remember when there was guys, when I was a cadet, that were still carrying full cylinders or full magazines of Glazer safety slugs, in their service pistol. And I don't remember what it was, Chuck. I don't remember if they came in 5 packs or 6 packs, but I remember there was one dude, one time I went into the squad room and he was loading up his P226, and he had it like, probably 5 or 6 of those blister packs there to load up, his duty mag plus his spare mag. And then his other spare mag had ball ammo in it, for if they were behind cover kind of thing. And this was the early 90s, so that was sort of the way of thinking, was you could either have penetration or you could have terminal effect, but you couldn't have both. And there probably was some truth to that, except the older guys that were sitting in the back corner, that all carried either Smith & Wesson Model 19s or 66s or 581s or 681s, were kind of like drinking their coffee and carrying 125 grain, Remingtons, I think it was, that were semi-jacketed hollow points, that were all laughing and drinking their coffee saying, yeah, okay, kid, keep loading your Glazer safety slugs there, So yeah, it's not anything new by any means. And it's probably one of those things that's going to go on forever, but it's be the difference between the learned and the people that actually know, and then everybody else who are the people that primarily read the ads. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you described as the true technicians of the craft, that's almost one of the tenets of primary and secondary. We try to remove the human element, and we're focused on, okay, what are the results? Yeah. And explain why. And what we can find real good answers that way. And that makes so many people angry, because we're not going to give in to this. Well, this is my favorite. This is because it feels good. No, I don't care.
It probably goes for just about anything related to this kind of stuff. The people that constantly poo-poo Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like they don't have, they are proponents of other types of martial arts that don't have a demonstrated street record, but they have perhaps maybe flashier marketing or cooler YouTube videos, and I think we're all old enough to remember, like back when Combat Handguns and Guns and Weapons for Law Enforcement, and those magazines were the periodicals that you had before the internet existed. And, you'd read the articles, but you'd also like look through all of these crazy ads that were in the back, like that's where I got my first pair of Eagle grips, was from the ad. And that's where you could get the Glazer safety slugs. And that's where you could get, all this stuff that was flashy and cool. And some of it was cool. Like, for example, I remember that was where I got my first VHS tape of Clint Smith. But, a lot of that stuff was fluff back in the 80s and the 90s, and it's still fluff now. It's just the delivery mechanism is different. And it leaves us with the exact same problem as it was before. There's the people that, are reading critically for content, and scientific veracity. And then there's people that are reading for entertainment value, and they don't understand that the entertainment value is not applicable to the real world, to anything other than entertainment. It's like getting your carry recommendations from what Arnold Schwarzenegger carried in his latest action film. It's analogous to that. And it has just as much applicability, which is to say in the real world, none.
So
amen.
I've been doing this long enough. I find myself sometimes in a role of tactical historian. Something I've seen more and more lately is people trying to justify why they're carrying ball ammunition. Well, I want enough penetration. I want to be able to shoot through this, shoot through that. I can tell you back in the day, I did hostage rescue training with LAPD SWAT. And at the time they were carrying, I forget which jacketed hollow point in their 1911s, but then they carried backup magazines of Full Metal Jacket. And their reasoning was, and it seemed pretty strong at the time, is that if they had to shoot somebody through a windshield or something like that, they wanted the extra penetration, they would use the Full Metal Jacket. And then otherwise, like doing a hostage open air shot, they would use the jacketed hollow points. Makes a lot of sense in the times with the ammunition they had. Something people don't know about is back in the day when you had Full Metal Jacket ammunition that you purchased, I probably need to take pictures of some of this, throw it up on the IG or something. But 9mm ball back then, or 45 caliber ball back then, wasn't what it is now. There was only ball ammo, which was military grade ammunition. It wasn't made to be the Winchester white box stuff. It wasn't made to be the really low price, burn it up training ammo that we have nowadays. People did not do 1,000 round classes, 2,000 round classes like some of these guys do in a weekend. So when you bought Full Metal Jacket, what you bought was the quality control of a military service pistol ammunition. You don't get that anymore. About the only thing you can still buy like that is one of the 9mm NATO loads. Like Federal will sell some. MagTech sells a very good 124 grade NATO load in 9mm. And it has the flash suppressed powder. It has a waterproof primer. It's got the same quality control that you have from certain, like your high end, like Gold Dots or HST or something like that. Extra quality control goes into this service ammunition. The other thing ball ammo doesn't have is it does not have a bonded bullet. So performance through barriers can be just as variable as it is with jacketed hollow points. Although when they hit tissue, they are always going to penetrate sufficiently. It's very common. The problem is that you can shoot through 2 or 3 people in a row with these rounds. But so ironically, they don't really penetrate cover or barriers better, like when you're shooting through cars and that sort of thing. So that's why we have the best of both worlds nowadays. Like the performance we had with the 124 plus P Gold Dot out of our 9mm at my old job, they penetrated car doors well. They penetrated very well through other barriers like windshield glass, drywall, stuff like that. And then on an open air shot, they expanded and penetrated sufficiently. Virtually every shooting we had with one of these bullets, and you can put like the critical duty or HSTs, things like that, fall into this category. You would hit a large grown man with a solid hit. It would go all the way through their torso, front to back, side to side, and either lodge in the skin on the other side or exit and fall on the ground. I can tell you one of the shootings that one of my guys had was a dude trying to run him over with the car, and he put a shot through the driver's glass. It hit the guy in the arm, went through his humerus, shattered his humerus.
You didn't find that funny?
No. Exited the arm, entered the armpit, went cross chest, cut the aorta, broke the rib, and then was lodged in the tissue on the far side. The last shot went through the glass at a back angle, because he sidestepped the car like a bullfighter when he fired. And so the last one went through glass, went through the seat, went through the scapula, hit his heart with enough velocity that it split the left and right ventricles into two pieces, broke the 8-9 rib on exit. And then because the way the guy was cranking the wheel, it hit him in the wrist, penetrated the soft tissue between the radius and ulnar bone, popped out and fell on the floor. And both of those are 124 grain Ranger T, so a plus P jacket at hollow point. So when people talk about, well, I want to have enough penetration, dude, there's more than plenty involved with these well-designed loads. But they don't have excessive in that, like a 9mm NATO round can shoot clean through a grown man and kill somebody 100 yards away rather easily.
So just to reiterate something that you said earlier for Chuck, with your personal selection of pistol rounds, you are looking for consistent function, consistent accuracy, consistent penetration, consistent expansion in that order. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. Once, first it's got to be reliable, then it's got to be accurate. Once I take care of those, make sure penetration is sufficient. Once penetration is sufficient, I look at, is it more than sufficient? Like a 40 caliber jacketed flat point will penetrate something like 56 inches of gelatin, if I remember right from my testing. Think about 3 gelatin blocks.
Yeah.
You're shooting completely through a cow versus a person. Now once you get more than sufficient penetration, then I start looking at bullets that expand to attenuate some of that. My analogy is I don't really think, back me up on this, Sherman, my talking with everybody I've talked to, jacketed hollow points don't actually create that much more wounding or trauma, but it's more of, in a police service role, it's kind of like a dragster going down the drag strip. If the parachute doesn't pop, what happens? The dragster's through the wall and into the neighborhood, right? Well, that's what we're trying to avoid. The graveyards are full of people. Look at World War II. How many jacketed hollow points were involved in World War II? The answer is none. Everybody that was shot that died from being shot got shot with ball ammunition. I have a buddy that has been involved in about 20 shootings with 9mm NATO overseas. And to steal his quote, none of the people that got shot were unimpressed with the cartridge, but he could shoot really good. So then what we're looking for is you do get a little bit you do get a little bit of extra wounding effect, but it's a much more controlled penetration that I'm really looking for at that point.
Yeah, my understanding with pistol wounding characteristics, you're not looking at anything, at least nothing overly measurable, that's going to be bigger than the diameter of the projectile, expanded or non-expanded. Mm-hmm. Unlike a rifle, which we have more permanent, just like what Sherman was talking about with going beyond the elasticity of the tissue, which rifle wounding creates. And
that's where I would say what we were talking about before. If I was looking at picking bullets, the modern search for a better 5.56 past green tip is an example. Or if I was in a world where I was carrying AKs, you can easily find ammunition that functions the weapon perfectly. It's 2 mil spec. It's designed for that gun. It works really, really well. Quality control is high. It's accurate. So the bullets penetrate more than sufficiently, but now we want to look at effectiveness. Doc Fackler, Doc Roberts, in my personal observation, I've seen several people shot with AKs where the wounding was no greater than like 380 Full Metal Jacket because the bullet didn't upset and it just poked in one side and went out the other. So that it had an ice pick type wound. And that would definitely be a case where you want to look at a bullet that has more enhanced performance to it,
So for rifles doing that, doesn't that mean it just has insufficient velocity to achieve permanent
No, some of it, if you look at the classic, like the M43 AK round that was ubiquitous in the Chinese and Russian forces, it was just a bullet design. Even at point blank range, the bullet would hit with full velocity, but it had such a late yaw cycle that it would be in one side and out the other before it did anything. With M855, it's the term is fleet yaw. Yeah. So sometimes the bullets yaw, sometimes the bullets don't, and it can vary from, like, if you test it out of one gun that exhibits more yaw versus a different gun, you'll see variable results. So on average, M855 actually works real well. Like Kyle Lamb speaks very highly of it, and Paul Howe hates it, and they were in the exact same fight in Black Hawk Down, right? But Kyle was lucky enough, his rifle wasn't exhibiting fleet yaw issues. And then obviously Paul's was, because he was penciling people and they were going in and out. So even at very close range with 20-inch guns or 16-inch guns that they were using at the time, they would shoot people, 20, 30 yards away. So clearly full velocity of the bullet, but the bullet was too stable going through and it wouldn't upset to give that fragmentation that is so classic with 5.56.
And I think one other thing that bears mention here, Matt, and Chuck will back me up on this, is a lot of people that aren't familiar with this or just looking at this in a superficial capacity don't grasp that whether it's clear ballistics gel or calibrated ballistics gel made to FBI specifications, the penetration numbers that are recorded in the tissue simulants are not one-to-one applicable to mammalian targets.
Yes. Meaning
that, if we shoot for 12 to 18 inches of penetration in tissue simulant, but what that is a homogeneous, meaning it's made out of only one thing, and there is no barriers, nor is there any type of container in there that has the ability to affect the fluid dynamics. So, when we're shooting, our brain is relatively homogeneous, meaning our gray matter portion of our brain in its construction. However, the container that it's inside amplifies the characteristics of that wound by either containing it or not containing it. Same thing goes for, our mid face and our lower face. We've all seen pictures and heard anecdotal stories. And I've seen a number of these where people have tried to attempt suicide and end up, just using their mouths basically as a conduit for pressure. And it just turns into a giant pressure relief valve, destroys everything in their mid face. But their brain essentially is unaffected or just affected superficially. So the moral of the story here is that at that same time, when Chuck and I were messing around with the lever action and the small guns, that 45 long Colt that I used that Chuck was talking about, we shot gel with that. And that was I think it's a 225 grain Hornady lever.
I think Sherman froze up.
Yeah. He got stage fright.
Yeah, think
there he is. He's back.
Got me back?
Yeah.
So we were using that 45 Colt on the gel, but earlier that day we also shot a pig with it in a couple different spots, both like a transcapular shot from laterally from one side of the shoulder blade to the other, and then also in the head. And the results were ridiculous. I feel like, Chuck, you can refresh my memory, but I feel like it transversed the entire block, including the four plies of denim, and we recovered it from the backside of the block in the additional denim that was hanging off the side. And it expanded to a pretty impressive diameter. It was around 75 or 80 caliber recovered. When we shot it into the pig, it went about 6 inches. So So the block is 18 inches, Chuck, or 20 inches. Is that right?
Those were 16-inch blocks.
Okay.
I'll tell you something I have noticed. Doc Roberts, Doc Fackler talk about the escape drag effect of skin on penetration when a bullet's trying to exit. Especially when it expands. Skin is elastic. You can pull on it. Well, the bullet will hit that skin and the skin will stretch out. And that's at least 4 inches of tissue penetration equivalent. And a lot of times it'll pop back and the bullet will be right there.
Right.
And then another variable I thought about was the pigs we shot weren't that big. So when you think about if you want to poke through a target, if the target is like really locked down, you'll get better penetration. If the target moves with the bullet, then you're going to lose penetration because it's like pushing the target versus penetrating the target. I saw that one time. I was kind of surprised. One of my guys had to shoot a rabid raccoon, and I've seen our Gold Dot 9mm shoot completely through 250-pound guys, and he shot this raccoon, I don't know, 30 pounds, whatever a raccoon is, and the bullet didn't exit, which I was worried about. But the raccoon definitely took a ride with the bullet. It flopped like 2 or 3 feet over to the side.
Interesting.
And I think momentum loss is what helped capture the bullet inside the raccoon. So I think some of these variables are always at play.
So what you're saying is if you're getting shot at, run the opposite direction. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Although
especially if you're getting shot at by a raccoon.
Yes. Hate when that happens.
We do know that probably Hopalong Cassidy was onto something in the old Western days when he would throw. So you're getting an extra 100 feet per second out of that cowboy shooting.
Nice.
They did that same thing in that Angelina Jolie movie too.
Yes. They curved the bullet's trajectory. Yeah.
Yep.
So with all this, how effective is a 38 Smith & Wesson out of an Enfield? Because it's just cool.
What bullet?
Not the 38-200. No, these are only 145s.
So oddly enough, one of my friends, Mark Fricky, is very, very into old revolvers, and he had a Sherman. Is it a Terrier that was the pre-J frame? So before the J frame, it was an I frame. It was an even smaller gun, and we tested several of the 38 Smith & Wessons that he had. And the 200 grain round nose and the 178. It's kind of an off bullet weight, but they would penetrate all the way to the end of a 16-inch block and then come. I have denim draped over the back because that gives it. Otherwise, the bullet will go flying into the sand and you lose it. Whereas the bullet goes through the block, it hits the denim. The denim's kind of a little stop catch. It's like a catcher's mitt, and we find a bullet. So those traditional 38 Smith & Wesson loads would penetrate fully through the block and then stop. But Mark also had some of the Buffalo bore. It's a hard cast semi-wad cutter, and those penetrated completely through 2 full blocks and ended up stuck in the berm, and we couldn't recover them. So, 32 inches of ballistic gelatin penetration with the bullet still traveling downrange. So
have you talked to him about 4.55 Webley? Because I just might have won a Webley Mark 6.
I have not, nor have I ever tested those, but we've down at Revolver Roundup when I'm there with Wayne Dobbs, Daryl Bolke are always there. Often Mark Frickley. Last year, Greg Ellifritz helped us out. Cecil Birch has been there. Pat Rogers was supposed to help us one time, and he passed right before the event, unfortunately. Claude Werner has taught of that. It's a good event. Everything revolvers, service revolvers, snub nose revolvers. I always bring ballistic gel, and we do a demo, and then at the end, people have I've got a 38 Smith & Wesson. Let's try that out and see what happens. So I've done gel testing with 22s, 22 Magnums, several of the 32, like the H&R Mag and the 327s, things like that. Daryl's got a couple of 44 specials. We've done quite a bit of just at that event, quite a bit of shooting.
That's cool.
I can tell you that I'm going to guess the 4.55s were a big bullet, and the British were still going with that slower is better and has better stopping power thing. If I remember right, those bullets are lucky to break 500, 600 feet. So even with a non-expanding projectile, I would expect that penetration is very controlled. And if I had to use one for defensive purposes, I would hope I had a full wad cutter or a wide nose semi wad cutter.
So what you're saying is if I'm running low on sims, I can just use this. We'll be fine.
Well, some of these rounds that I've chronographed, some of these olden day rounds, like the original Derringers were a 41 rimfire.
Remington, yeah.
And, those bullets would barely break 500 feet per second. Well, a sim round is 400 feet per second. Mm-hmm. If that gives you, there's a difference in bullet mass, but velocity does matter to some extent.
Yeah. Well, I was reading, especially with the Webleys, if you're looking at one chambered in 45 ACP, don't be using modern ammo.
No, you don't. They ruined a lot of those needle.
Yeah.
Trying to look for a way to shoot cheap ammo.
So you guys want to talk about revolvers more. So here it is. And what was it? 327s?
Yeah, the 327 Federal. That's actually something I'm investigating. Cecil stole my idea and he bought one, and a couple other people have. Lee has one. Mm-hmm. So my idea was have you get an extra shot in a J-frame size gun. It's a 6-shooter versus a 5-shooter. You can get ammunition that penetrates easily as well as a 38 special, but you get less recoil. So you get more bullets that kick less with the same penetration. I've been playing around with that idea as what to carry for my backup gun instead of a 38 snub. Because, we're all truthfully always looking for better, smoother, faster, more gooder, right?
Sure.
Yep.
And isn't that, can't you run like 5 different types of rounds out of there, Chuck? Like 5 true different calibers? I mean, they're the same caliber, but different loadings.
Which people call the short, which shooting out of your average, even a snubby, is like shooting 22s. 38 Smith & Wesson long, which is very easy to get a hold of. And again, most of those kick like a 22. And oddly enough, there were people back in the day that because of the extreme accuracy of the 32 Smith or the 32 longs, that they advocated those as a small caliber hunting pistol because they had a very great effect on, you could get rabbits and squirrels and things like that and kill things as large as coyotes. You got 30 H&R mag, and then you have the 327 Federal, the 327 Magnum, which is a serious. The 115, I think it's a 115 grain gold dot. I got to look, but I do recall in ballistic gelatin testing that 327 gold dot almost equaled the plus P 9mm gold dot in effect.
Wow.
In expansion. So, and now it's loud. It is a loud gun when you're using those full house rounds, but you can load them down pretty easy with a 32 H&R or 32 long, and they're very, very pleasant to shoot.
Okay, Chuck, would you consider a 351C Smith & Wesson? Caleb was telling me about that he carries a 22 mag. To me, it sounds really cool. It sounds like a great option for a backup. I don't know how comfortable I would be carrying that as my primary. Well, I guess it depends on the circumstances, but Sherman, ballistically, how have you been seeing 22 Magnums perform on people's faces?
I don't know if I have seen a 22 Magnum. I mean,
because they all die.
Yeah, they could, or the fact that it's just indistinguishable, really, from the recovered projectile from something else that would be in the same neighborhood. But the next time I find one that's suspicious, I'll
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. I'll see what we can do as far as trying to size that. I mean, in my experience, I think 22 Magnums are kind of awesome. I mean, I
love shooting them.
Yeah, like Chuck was talking about, that 22 long rifles like hardly ever make the 1,000, foot per second threshold. 22 Magnums, I don't think they do too tremendously better than that, but I know that most of them will clear 1,000 out of a snub nose gun, at least like in the LCR types. Yeah, they're just kind of fun guns. I get a kick, out of, small caliber. It's kind of funny. I've sort of gone to the extremes. I like really big guns like the 45-70s and the 44 mags. But I also like really, really small guns. Like I just got one of my Grail guns the other day that I found in the used cabinet that I got with a gift card that somebody gave me for my birthday. There was a Ruger Bearcat, and I've always wanted one of those, and I just could never find them because they're really popular and people love them. And I found one, and I was like, man, this is the coolest little 22 around, and it's just a neat little gun. And but yeah, man, I feel kind of the same way you do. Like I wouldn't be opposed to using either of those as a backup gun or, like a check in the mailbox kind of gun or something. But, as far as like actually hitting the streets for, regular life, I would be a little bit apprehensive about going that light for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's seven round capacity. Now you have a little better capacity. It's easy to shoot, relatively light recoil.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't doubt like, if I know that Claude Werner and Caleb, have really like spent a lot of time in that study, and I don't doubt their choice at all. I mean, I think that if they feel good with it, like I feel good with their choice, I'm not going to poo poo anybody else's. Yeah. I haven't, I don't own a 22, J-frame or LCR size gun at this time, but I do, obviously own a bunch of the 38s, and that's about as small as I go. And I recently wrote an article on my website a couple of weeks ago about the 21st century J-frame, and it kind of met with mixed reviews because I don't think people. It didn't appeal to the advertisement crowd because they want confirmation bias. I don't think they get it.
Is the what do you call it? The end result of the whole article? It's just a SIG 365.
Correct. Yeah. It's not so much about the equipment. It's about the mission, so people, go like, well, I carry a J-frame because it makes it easy for me to carry, in my sweatpants or carry in my gym shorts or, carry in, business casual, where I have work, where discreetness is the number one priority.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could carry like a North American Arms mini revolver in the same capacity. I mean, I don't mean capacity, in the same mission, but if you can do that same thing with a gun that is easily hidden, but still allows like very, very good usability, like it does in a SIG P365, like why wouldn't you? Now, I agree that there are some roles where that's not going to necessarily work as well. Like for me, like I'm a fairly big sized guy. I can't make a P365 work for pocket carry, and I'm not really crazy about the idea of having a striker fired gun for pocket carry, just because all of the holsters that I like for pocket carry, which are like the old Bob Micahs, the Safari Lands, and the Kramers, for the striker fired guns are huge. And, I'm a big size guy or a good size guy, and I can't fit those in my pocket. So I don't, unless you put it in a cargo pocket, which I don't wear cargo pocket pants, but even then I don't know like how you could quite pull that off and have it be effective. But I mean, but for putting it on an ankle or for a discrete appendix carry gun and the people that are the true technicians that carry appendix guns will tell you that the biggest problem with carrying an appendix gun, in things that don't have a belt, you know, in light carry or gym carry type situations, has nothing to do with a lot of the things that people commonly think. It has a lot to do with the weight of the gun. So, you know, there's a real red line there between the literal tipping point where the gun's going to fall out of your pants because it's going to make your pants fall down or tear, or, you know, pull your pants down just with the sheer weight, versus what won't, you know. So like a steel frame, J frame will make your pants fall down regardless of how, you know, if you don't tie your drawstring tight, it's going to fall down, and it's also going to be floppy. Same thing goes with, you know, even like an M&P 9mm compact, you know, the old 12+1 version, or a Glock 26, same kind of thing.
We need to get you an Enigma.
Yeah, I've heard about those. I just haven't gotten in line to get one yet. I just haven't. But yeah, I would totally use it. But yeah, I think that's kind of the cutoff. You know, all of the things considered without, you know, using the Enigma. If you have, you know, if you have an airweight revolver, an airweight J frame, a steel J frame, and then a SIG P365. If you weigh them all, you know, the steel J frame weighs the most, even loaded, compared to the SIG P365. But it's that tipping point, you know, and balance that really does it. And is, for me, the P365 does that. And I think that they've gotten the kinks worked out of those as far as the accuracy issues and the sights working loose, and then some of the other things that people were having, and to the point where it's now a workable solution. And I, you know, when I see guys like Craig Douglas and Cecil and Paul Sharp, you know, guys that use, you know, smaller size guns for discreet carry, but also like extreme sports, if you will, you know, I have to like look at it and go, like this bears some reexamination, and then not also be like such an old fuddy-duddy that I'm going to be like, but gosh darn it, like, you know, this is the hill I'm going to die on with my J-frame revolver, and I'm not ever going to, you know, graduate up to something that's more accessible. I do think that the J-frame or the LCR gets the nod when it comes to the deep appendix carry stuff, just because the hook-shaped grip makes it easier to snatch it out than that kind of 90 degree or close to 90 degree, like what is it, 72 degrees or something grip that, you know, most semi-automatic pistols have. That just makes it easier to get out of your waistband. But that's not anything new either. You know, that's like something that goes back to like Chick Gaylord times, like when he was making holsters for men, you know, that wore higher waisted pants than we wear now. You know, when men wore their pants literally right below their navel instead of actually at their hip line. And he made holsters for even up to the large frame, you know, like end frame revolvers that were converted to snub noses, like the Model 27s and whatnot, that, you know, would fit with just the grip being retrievable on a revolver. You know, you just, as much as people try to sell that idea with semi-automatic pistols, it has to be done very, very, very well for that to work. And a lot of people haven't cracked the code. Obviously, Filster's cracked the code with that Dark Star Gear, JM, and Keepers have, but a lot of other people that you see on these Instagram ads and stuff, it's like, oh, that's cute, but you're not. Exactly. You're really overlooking this small detail that is actually like a non-starter, you know, for if you actually know what you're doing.
Yep. Well, you can always carry a 12-pound 2011.
Whoa.
In an Enigma as well with a weapon light. Wow. I think it's kind of funny though that it was the 365. That was the conclusion, because it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. That's the modern J-frame. Well, the punchline in there was that the modern J is actually the Ruger LCR. Like to be truthful, that's the 21st century J-frame, but the gun that we would use in the capacity of a J-frame
can be fulfilled in most of those roles by the P365. And now it sounds like, I don't know anything about the Springfield products because I steer clear of those, but I'm a fan of the Shield. I think Chuck is too. And now they've got some Shield that holds, 10
higher capacity. Yeah. The Plus.
Before long, I'm sure I'll get a hold of one of those too.
Yeah. Hey, Chuck, what was your verdict with a 351? Would you carry that as a backup?
I actually had one for a while, and I sold it to a buddy of mine that's retired now and has arthritis and issues with recoil. So a shooter of some stature, Bill Rogers of the world famous Rogers Shooting School, Claude told me that the 351 was his backup gun. It's what he carried in his pocket. Super, super lightweight, like 10 ounces, something like that, 7-shot. I can tell you that it's not a Doc Roberts type test, but we were making a new fire barrel at the range, and from 40 yards away, a 22 Magnum Gold Dot from a snubby will shoot completely through a 55-gallon steel drum and kick up mud on the berm 20 yards downrange. So, what's my gel penetration, things like that. In that particular case, I don't know, but hard target penetration was certainly impressive for such a small gun. The 22 Magnum Gold Dot would be my go-to. And then like the CCI Maxi Mags, in my observation, none of the hollow points really expand well out of a snub, but those bullets do tend to yaw very, very effectively. I would say that a 22 Magnum short barrel would, in wound ballistics wise, would be very analogous to a 22 long rifle out of a rifle, in which I've noted every one of those shootings I've attended has been a homicide. So I think the bullets easily has enough penetration, obviously very low recoil. It's easy to shoot those guns well. Personally, I wouldn't lose any sleep over using a 22 Magnum as a backup gun.
Now, and when we're talking about backups, one quick question, because Chuck actually has to go here shortly. What are the criteria for you? Because I learned something, important lesson from you a few years ago, specifically about ankle carry and weight. So for you, for backup, what are the parameters?
So in ankle carry, I want a gun that is less than 1 pound.
And that's loaded.
Yes. My left knee is wrecked from carrying guns like Glock 26s and stuff like that on my ankle for my entire career. My left knee is just shot. Tom Gibbons came up with the idea of the ankle gun needs to be less than 1 pound. And he liked things like Colt Cobras, the old original Colt Cobra, airweight J-frames, things like that. It's very, very good advice. Tom's a smart guy. I tend to carry a lot of pocket because of the nature of the uniform that I'm wearing at work. So in my humble opinion, nothing accesses from a pocket better than a concealed hammer, like a 642 or a Ruger LCR. Nothing comes out of a pocket better. If I have my hand in my pocket, on the shot timer, my first round hits are coming at like 0.58, 0.6. That's really, really fast. Easy to carry, comfortable, things like that. Now, if I was going to do something like some of the guys, like if they're still wearing an undervest and it goes under the shirt, and you can strap a gun to the vest straps like you would a shoulder holster type draw, I would go with one of the flat semi-autos like the 365, the Glock 43X, something like that would be my choice. I know a number of guys that are carrying Glock 42s on their vest, and those, there's no weight penalty to speak of. It's almost like the gun is just invisible, but it's there if you need it, kind of a thing. I will say that what Sherman was talking about with a 21st century J-frame, that's been investigated for some time. Tom Gibbons came up with the idea that the small 9mm, like the Car PM9, would replace the J-frame, and brought that up at the Snubby Summit that was kind of famous in our circles way back in the day. So a problem is a lot of times we don't shoot these guns in the manner that they're carried. I have a friend that's investigated a lot of backup guns, and he's tried several of the small 9mm and 380s. keeps going back to a snub because what he found is a consistent issue of not doing what most people do when we go to the range. Most people, like, you will go to the range, unload your carry ammo, shoot some ball ammo, clean your gun, reload your carry ammo. So if he took the gun the way it was carried, like pull it out of your pocket and shoot it, he was noting he was consistently getting the first round would fire and then he would get a stovepipe. And he had that with several of the small 9mm and 380s. And he thinks it was a combination of lube getting a little dry after, like, if you carried it for 2 to 3 weeks without really working the gun. And then, things like pocket lint, dust bunnies, things like that, get into the gun when you're in a deep cover mode. So he kept going back to the 5-shot snub because if in theory, some of these other guns are 7, 8, 9 shots, easier to reload, things like that. But if they were consistently giving him one round in a stovepipe when fired in a manner he was carrying them at work, he went back to the snub because he really did get, all 5 shots if he needed them.
That makes sense. A lot of sense.
I don't think we test our gear under our operational parameters enough.
Mm-mm. Well, that was one of the things that we did the other night at the range. We're breaking out a bunch of pistols. Okay, it's getting dark. Let's use handhelds now. We have weapon lights on them, but let's use handhelds and see what we can do and see how easily also we can identify what we're trying to shoot. Certain flashlights were insufficient. Funny how that works. So I understand you have things to do, places to go, people to see.
Yeah, I have to get up very early in the morning.
Yeah. I thought firefighters just sleep all day. What do you?
Yeah. Lately, that has not been the case. And, people ask me what we do at this job. We do everything, air crash rescue, firefighting. We do the police role. We do hazmat. In anything that happens, we have to handle it. We do quite a bit of work back in the county, guys, in the south part of the county, because like every place else, you're undermanned and overworked,
Yeah. So before you take off, Chuck.
Okay.
What are your final thoughts? Any tidbits of information we may have missed? And where can people find you?
There is no such thing as a magic bullet. Stop looking. Things that are tried and true for a reason. And I think we know where the answer is. Until we can set phasers on, disintegrate, we know where the answer is. So we need to get our training up to the snuff is what it really comes down to. And then my website's www.agiletactical.com, Agile Training and Consulting. Looking at a pretty busy schedule this year. I'm going to be in Utah twice as an example. So looking forward to that. We got some good stuff coming up.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Me too.
And our thing in September.
Yeah,
but that's another thing. Oh yeah. So what was the rough date for your visit? That's right around the corner.
That's in June.
June. Yeah. I'm looking forward to
it. Should be June 11th.
Yeah, that's going to be a good time. And just based on our interaction, the feedback I got and everything from September's event, I am super excited about you coming out. It's going to be a good time.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Hey, Sherman, do you want to keep on going or should we end now? And we can do another episode at a later time.
Great. Yeah.
So same. Final thoughts, anything we missed, and where can people find you, especially your Instagram page?
Sure. So I think kind of like following on with what Chuck said, I'd stick to the midline as far as effectiveness for projectile placement, regardless of which plane of the body you're facing. There's a lot to be said for scientific veracity, which is basically all there is to say. if it's not scientific, it can't be held to a scientific standard. It's folly. There's a fine line between where science and philosophy and lies exist, and they is not a fine line difference between science and lies. So you just have to be wary of that kind of thing. But you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Sherman House. My website is civiliandefender.com. And I'll be with Chuck this next weekend at the Rangemaster Tactical Conference in Dallas. And then my next open enrollment class is in, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's Dahlonega, Georgia. It's with the Complete Combatant and Shelley Hill. They're great people. And that's next month on the 17th of April. And I still got a few spots left for that class if people are interested. And there's all that stuff is on my website. If you sign up for notifications on my site, I promise you I don't spam people. And even though it's a blog per se, it's more like a website where I write an essay like once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Not that frequent.
And you're also on this primary and secondary forum.
Yes, that's right.
So that means we could have these discussions on a regular basis on the forum and discuss ballistic-y things and face shooting things.
Sure.
That'd be awesome. Well, thanks, guys. That was an awesome discussion. And I think we absolutely need to do a sequel. And I want to get Pressburg on, and I want to get GKR on with us. I think it would be a good time. Big thanks to the sponsors. Big thanks to Philster. Big thanks to Staccato. Big thanks to Walther. Also, big thanks to the Patreon subscriber. Go to patreon.com/primary and secondary. Help support the network. We have this huge, big training thing coming up in September. Sherman, if you're bored, you are welcome to join us. September 4th, 5th, 6th. We have a all-star cast of instructors. It's a buffet of training. We have I wouldn't say they're an ammo sponsor, but they're going to be able to provide us with ammo at a very reasonable price, pre-COVID and non-rapey pricing. That's right. You heard it here. And awesome. It's not, and it's not going to be, the ammo is not going to be, I'm not going to be able to sell cases at a time. It's basically one case of 9 per student and probably a case of 5.56 per student. What you do with it after the class, who knows? All that's on primarysecondary.com. Make sure you're using our forum. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, tell your friends. I suspect this is going to be another one of those episodes that people are going to be sharing. They're going to be quoting because there was so much good information. And this is information that people don't necessarily pay attention to because it's accurate for one, but it's real. And there's critical thinking and there's science and we're not catering to bias and what we like and what we think is cool. No, that just results, because that's what we're about here at Primary and Secondary. So thanks for watching or listening. I'm going to cut the feed now so I can edit this and upload it and have it shareable as soon as possible. So thanks for watching.
May the force be with you.
That's always right.
If I'd have thought of it when we were talking, I would have pointed out when we were talking about Gary Roberts, that it said Sherman is also just a dentist.